originally was put in the program to talk about public speaking, to give you some skill building in that. You probably already have that through your OPO or whatever you do locally. But with something that happened recently, I thought there was a different opportunity. And Ron, if you would come forward with me, we're going to talk about public speaking and advocating for organ donation, but we're going to use as an application the recent UNOS call for public comment on the new UNOS kidney allocation proposal, which is the first real change in that process, which has been more wait list based, how long you wait on the list, to some pretty complex ideas. So Ron, stand with me here, okay, and let me just set this up for us. And we are not going to try and explain that new policy to you, okay? It is a very complex policy. They've been working on it for years. And if you go and read the proposal, and I recommend that you do, it's 39 pages long, it's very detailed, and there's some very key concepts. Ron is on the committee of the Kidney Committee for UNOS. I serve on the Patient Affairs Committee, which is very interesting, anything that affects patients, and also recently joined the board of UNOS. So I'm going to get the vote on this, and he is somebody who's been there for part of the development. He hasn't been on there 9 years that they've been working on this. And when we knew this was coming out, Ron called me and he said, you know, Jim, we got to use TRIO to really get the word out on this. I said, yeah, I agree, but I've talked to the liaisons down there in UNOS, and I said, you know, the key to this whole thing, it's something I wanted to avoid from the first time I heard it. I said, this is going to be so controversial, you're not going to win no matter what it says. And then I find myself on the Patient Affairs Committee, and all of a sudden, I can't avoid it. And then I get calls to TRIO saying, so what's TRIO's position on this? Damn, that's where I didn't want to be. And now I'm going to be on the board that's going to vote on this. Years ago, and some of you may remember this, TRIO got involved in the liver allocation issue back in the early 90s. And it was one of those things that, again, yes, no, it didn't matter. Half the world was divided one side or the other. And TRIO took a position on that and lost half their membership. They lost about 3,000 members and about 20 chapters over that issue. And to this day, 20 years later, you still find that history in there. So we're not going to do that this time. What we're going to do is advocate for exactly what I'm talking about, public speaking and bringing that message out. So what I said to somebody down there, you need to put together, Ron was saying, Jim, you know, you need to talk to your chapters, this and this. I said, no, Ron. Somebody needs to put together a slide presentation that we all use the same thing on. Because in my experience, when the draft of this came out, probably a year ago almost, we did take it to our chapters. And I took it to our Philadelphia chapter, and we did a presentation with 2 doctors, one on the phone, one in the room, and we walked it through piece by piece so we understood it. And each piece we said, now, given what you understand, are you in favor of that or not? And they said, we're all in favor of it. By the time we got through, we had 100% support for that draft at the time. One of our other chapters did the same thing, supposedly. They presented the policy, and they had the same results. 100% of their members totally opposed to that same policy. What's that tell you? It's all in the communication, isn't it? And so I said to Ron, you got to work with that committee. We need one set of slides that everybody uses so the message is consistent. Now recently they came out with those slides, and there's recorded narration with them. And we were given an opportunity to see those, and they're out for public comment, so you can see them too. And when I listened to it, I said, oh God, I think they missed the boat here. They're very well done, but they're so complex that I'm going to tell you, the average person, even those with a vested interest like you and I, we're not going to understand it by the time they get through, and we're not going to watch all 2 parts of the slide presentation. One is about 15 minutes, the other is 10 minutes. You're not going to stay awake for the whole thing. So I'm working through patient affairs, he's working through the kidney committee to come back and say, we need a different slide set for the average person to really understand the highlights of this so that they can form a position. And so what we're recommending is to advocate for this, and we'll give you some more background, to become educated, to share it with your chapters, okay? But with what I sent to you in the package just recently, this is what I sent. That's all the links and the background. So you have what I'm talking about, and that's all the facts. If you can get through it, good. If you can't, hang on, because between Ron and I from the committees, we're going to come out with something different that's a little bit easier to work with. So with that setup, and the final recommendation, what does TRIO stand for? It stands for you getting to understand what this is about and deciding to express whatever your opinion is directly to the UNOS committee through the public comment process. And that's what this is all about. So Ron, talk to me a little bit. What's it been like being on the kidney committee, being somebody who's been a frequent buyer of kidneys?
Yeah, it's
Not buyer, but you know.
He's just kidding. That's not.
Wrong words. Wrong words.
Yeah, I've had 2 kidney transplants, so I'm going to hold hand to this. The kidney committee is comprised mostly of physicians, and they're wonderful people. This is all volunteers, okay? And this proposal now that's being put out for public comment has been worked on for nearly close to 10 years. And
A little louder.
Oh, I'm sorry, let me get
Yeah, talk to the mic.
has been worked on for nearly 10 years. You should know that TRIO's been involved in this for almost 8 of those 10 years, because I've been following it, and a lot of people have been following it. I've been to every public meeting around the country about it. It was a concern of me that we get it right this time.
This is before he got his last kidney, by the way.
Absolutely, yeah. The new proposal, and as Jim said, we don't want to go into the mechanics of it, okay? This is up to you to go online, go for the proposal. It's a little difficult because this proposal is aimed more at the technical side of it. And if you're not involved in this on a daily basis, you may need a medical dictionary there to take a look at it, to understand what it is. But basically, what we have, Jim, is the overriding qualification to get a kidney in the past has been how long you've been on the list, okay? Which created problems. A lot of discarded kidneys, a lot of inequitable transplants. Good example is a 75-year-old man getting a 15-year-old kidney. It's wonderful, the 75-year-old man is going to live, but that kidney will not survive the recipient. He'll pass away before the kidney stops working, whereas if that kidney was given to say a 20 or 30-year-old man or woman or child, it would last a lot longer. It's better utility, longevity, and that was the basic precept of why they wanted to come up with a reallocation process. What we've got now, well, let me just go back a second. The original proposal was the CARS committee, where it was a kidney allocation reallocation based on LIFT, L-Y-F-T, and I won't even go into what that means.
Life benefit. Okay.
Yeah.
What's the benefit of that organ donation happening?
And, yeah, we went through it for years, and I want to let you know, you sometimes wonder, does my opinion really count for anything? Should I even respond? Because these committees sit there and they make up their minds, and they don't consider what we, the people that really are going through it, suffer and are concerned with. Well, when LIFT committee came for the final public hearing before going to the executive committee, they had a meeting in St. Louis, and everybody was there. I was there, I went for TRIO, the NKF was there, the Renal Support Network, the AAKB, and I even contacted the American Diabetic Association because they have a vested interest with 10 million members that a percentage of them will go into kidney failure. And we all presented our views, and we were a unified block of people that considered the LIFT proposal not acceptable at that time. And by God, they took it back to committee. It wasn't passed, and they said we have to go back and rework it. And this is what they've come up with now. And basically, what it is it's the top 20% of the kidneys retrieved or donated will go to the top 20% of the candidates.
Top in terms of quality.
Quality. It's always equality. And are you all familiar with how a liver transplant how you get a liver transplant? It's based on a point system called the MELD system, where they put different characteristics together and it sets this MELD number, and that's based on how soon you'll get the kidney, or the liver. So this is basically what we're going to. There's going to be points allocated for certain conditions you have, if you're diabetic, if you're highly sensitized. I should mention, a lot of times the really highly sensitized people are very hard to qualify for a kidney because it won't match. And they sit there for years and years and years, and they never get the kidneys and they die, okay? So we're putting more emphasis on these highly sensitized candidates where they'll get a little preferential treatment, and rightly so, because they've waited their time. So we're going to change the allocation, 2020, and what's left is going to be the 80%. And they used to call this 80% extended criteria kidneys. We're not going to use that anymore. It's the kidneys that aren't in the top 20%. They may have a little bit something wrong with them. They may have, maybe the donor has a little hypertension, maybe they have a little diabetes, maybe
They're coming from an older donor.
Older donor, especially, yeah. And then those will be allocated to the list based on certain criteria, which if you go into the proposition on the units, you'll find out how it's rated. And there's a reason why they're doing that, is that they get better allocation. They feel that in the long run, this system will cut down the amount of retransplants. And you have to understand, we're all transplant recipients, or many of us are here. Chances are, in our lifetime, we may need another heart, even heart, lung, liver, or kidney, or pancreas. It doesn't have a finite life. The average, actually, the mean average of a kidney is 8 years right now, a cadaver. But a kidney has an effective life, would you believe, of 130 years in a perfect situation. So there's going to be retransplants, and their thinking is the more utility we can get out of a kidney, the less need for retrans in the short term. It'll go a lot longer.
So more kidneys available.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's really one of the basic things why they're doing this.
Let me interject then at that point,
Okay.
just to add to what you're saying. The other big concern is older people are not going to get these organs. Oh my God, I'll never get a kidney. What the physicians are telling us, including Dr. Tom Peters, who's been on our board, he said, no, Jim, he says, nobody knows for sure, but I guarantee you what's going to happen is more kidneys are going to be available for the older patient because of this new rule. And so that's the concern you'll hear. Originally, there was a lot of focus on age, and we can't do that, says the government. You're discriminating on age. And so this revision really takes age as one of the factors. And this process of scoring so that the most sick people get the organ first, not just because you got online first, is true for hearts, lungs, and livers already. Kidneys are finally catching up.
And also they're throwing away the payback system. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. But the OPOs have to live by this system right now where they'll swap organs sometimes because of the matching process, and then they have to pay them back. And it causes tremendous backlogs. So that's out the window, and that's going to help a lot also. Being quite honest with you, okay, and I have to be because I've gone through this. A lot of time, some transplant centers, not all of them, have this built-in hesitancy of taking older donors. There's a variety of reasons for it.
Well, let's explain the basic reason for it.
Okay.
Having been on the Membership Professional Standards Committee, which is the one that oversees the practices in every transplant center and can shut them down, They run simulations that said, given the population you are serving and the organ type you're doing, this is what your experience should be in terms of patient life and graft survival. And that's monitored with every single transplant. And so metrics are generated to say, are they meeting what we expect through that simulation or not? And if we're not, they go into the hospital and say, you got a problem. You're not living to the standards that we expect if you're following the best practices. Now, in that scenario, what would you do if you were the director of a transplant program? Okay? Well, I could cherry pick. I only want the best. I'll get the best results, but guess what? A lot of patients aren't going to get transplants because you won't list them. The listing is done by the center. So in one sense, the other rules are forcing transplant centers to work against what this committee is trying to do. And so sometimes you have to take that into consideration and work with a way that takes that incentive away so that transplant centers will take an older patient and an older organ and do the transplant.
And just for your own feeling of safety, they've had a lot of research papers coming out recently that show the longevity between an older recipient and an older donor are good. They always thought, oh, you know, it's not a good type of transplant. And I'll give you a prime example, me, okay? When I had a kidney pancreas in 2001, and my kidney failed 8 years later, and I still had a viable pancreas, and I had to go back on dialysis, and you know, I needed a kidney as fast as I could get there because I wanted to keep the pancreas going. I live in California, where the average time for a cadaver type O kidney is 10 to 12 years right now, wait time. And unless you have a living donor, which I didn't, you don't have very few alternatives. What I did is I multi-listed, which is acceptable under UNOS rules.
In fact, transplant centers are required by law to advise you that you have that option.
So I listed in with our good friend Dr. Peters in Florida. I listed in Houston, Texas, and I listed in Tucson, Arizona. Well, I got a call 6 months after I listed in in Tucson. And they said, Ron, we have a kidney for you. It's a 75-year-old woman. And like all people, I was a little, you know, hesitant at first, but I knew the surgeon. I worked on I was on his pancreas committee for 2 years, and he was our chairman. And he says, this donor, and it's a potential donor because they hadn't even retrieved the organs. It's a 75-year-old woman with a pre-retrieval creatinine of 0.05. The new kidney patients know what that is. A gross renal function of 80%. She was as slim as very slim, had very healthy, was actually a very religious woman, so she led a great lifestyle. And she had got into the situation of being brain dead while she was jogging and had tripped and hit her head on the curb. So it is a traumatic death, which is the best time, if you could say best.
If you're going to die,
that's the way to do it.
From our perspective, right?
So he says, we're going to, we don't know yet, we have to retrieve it. It seems, because she had died in San Diego, or was brain dead in San Diego, they had offered the kidney, first of all, in California to within the radius. And that radius included, I don't know how many, about 10 or 15 transplant hospitals. They all turned her down because she was 75 years old. Okay? And my doctor, he says it's a fantastic chance for you, and I grabbed it and I went.
How old were you, Ron?
Well, I was 66 at the time, yeah, and for me, it made absolute sense to take that kidney because I know it was going to I'd get longevity out of it, and at 66, I didn't want to take a 20-year-old person's kidney or 15-year-old person's kidney. And it's turned out fantastically. It's been coming on 3 years now. I'm doing great. So this is what's going to happen in the future if this proposal passes. But it's up to you. We want to hear from you. I mean, the last time we did this balloting, we got such little response. I mean, take the time to read it, and if you have any questions, call your doctor, speak to your OPO even, they'll help you, and come up with an opinion and send it in to the UNOS Kidney Committee. We want to hear. Yeah.
The only thing I would add to that is, we're going to open up this questions in a minute, but I don't want you to question the techniques or the science behind this or the details, okay? We're not here to do that. We're talking about advocating. And from that perspective, Ron just gave you the message, and that is, form your own opinion, respond to UNOS with whatever that is. I talked to the liaison for the Patient Affairs Committee that I'm on yesterday, and we shared the same opinion about the slide set they put out there already. Too complex, too long, make it shorter. She said, well, I'm going to start putting that together. And so she and I are going to work on it. And we're going to send it to Ron and the committee to look at and see if they find that that's a useful tool, in which case we'll keep you informed, because we got the distribution list. We sent you all the details here, but we'll keep you informed as that may come to be, or as this develops, so that you can have something that you can use personally. And secondly, you can take to your chapters and say, we don't have a meeting. This is a good reason to have a community open meeting to talk about something that's really important to the transplant community. And have your chapter sponsor that meeting and get a local nephrologist to come and be the expert witness on this. The two doctors we had in the room for our meeting that I told you before, they did not present. They didn't even offer opinions. They answered questions for anybody in the room about what we were talking about. If there was some medical thing there that didn't make sense, or somebody had a question, they were there as a resource. And those doctors are very willing to do that. Came out in person in an evening meeting, spent 2.5 hours there, and it was a fantastic meeting. It really was. So that's what we're advocating. Get informed, help share that information, get people to respond to where it's going to count, which is through the process that's defined on UNOS, so that the committee, Ron included, will get your thoughts and get as much feedback as they can. Yes?
I think the bottom line, at least my husband had lung transplant, and they, until 2005, they went to a score.
Right.
And what they found was many fewer people were dying waiting. And to me, that's like the big message.
That's always the goal of these enhancements to the process, to get longer life in the patient and to get longer life of the transplanted organ. And sometimes it's a slight tweak. In this case, it's a major tweak. They run simulations to prove what they're thinking is going to work, and then after they do it, they analyze a year later and beyond what the results were to make sure how it compared with the simulation they did before, to see if they're on track. Somebody else, yes?
I just want to tell you, you were kind enough to send me. I'm Jane Barrett, and I have a kidney transplant, 24 years. You were not kind enough to send this to me 3 days ago, here, this proposal stuff here, and I happened to read it all last night because I figured we're going to maybe talk about it today. I just want to tell you that I didn't read it 39 pages, that's not on here. Everything that was on here, I read here, and listened to the recordings and all that last night. And I got it. I can tell you that I understand what they were talking about.
Very good.
So,
now, you are a unique audience.
Yeah.
24 years with a kidney. Anybody's vested in this and knows some of these situations. She does.
I may not have understood everything, every detail or anything,
Right.
but if anybody wants to know, I got it.
Good.
So,
I
so
understand.
you really are the best advocate to teach this to the candidate. I mean, somebody that's been there and knows the basics of it. And if I was a candidate for you started telling me about it, I'd listen, because you've got the backgrounds, you know.
Well, I didn't know anything about this until
Right.
I just got this 3
Yeah.
Good.
days
And
ago.
that trio's doing its job.
Yeah.
You were kind
And
enough to
that's
send it
good.
to me, and I did look at it last night there, and both the recordings and everything, and they're involved in everything, lots of graphs and all this kind of stuff, but I got the gist of everything there. That they
Good.
were talking
Well,
about.
The other thing that I suggest you do, keep track on the Trio homepage and the news items. For example, the day before the September 21st release of this, September 20th, Thursday, there was an article in the New York Times which almost looked like an expose on the discarded organs that are going to waste because UNOS isn't doing its job and blah, 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 okay? And you read it, and by the time I got through, my first was defensiveness, but as I read it, I thought, wow, this is great timing. because they're saying there's a problem, and I knew the next day they were coming out with this big announcement of a possible solution. Okay, and that's what this is meant to do, right? Reduce the number of discarded kidneys and get them to the right people. And so I actually talked to the director of communications down there to find out, did they have anything to do with that? He said, no, we didn't. It just happened that way. The author of the article about discarded kidneys, which is up on our website under the news down there, go to UNOS News and click on it. He said he's been working on that for 6 months. And he saw the opportunity, obviously, and so he got the story out there the day before. But I'll tell you, it's a great combination piece. So, kind of be beyond what you just did, also go find that link and read that. And it tells you more about what the problem is that we're describing, and then you understand how this addresses some of that that came out the next day. Great. Unless there's another comment, yes, sir.
Do I understand that these guidelines are based on the historical record of the life of the kidneys? Because if they are, I understand that there are some present trials underway that may lengthen the time that a kidney is viable.
That's exactly the type of question that would take us another hour to get into because there's so much behind it. So I'm going to pass on the question.
Let me just make a quick statement.
Go ahead. Don't go into the quick.
No, I'm not going in it.
Okay.
This kidney committee and the future kidney committees are looking at this proposal, and if it goes through, it's not set in stone. As it goes into effect, they will change it where needed. So they're willing to update it as they go along, and that may answer your question.
All right, be careful what he just said.
Okay.
It's out there as a proposal.
Right.
The committee will modify based on public comment. Then it gets finalized and sent to the board. The board won't see this until next June. So this is not a policy going into effect next month. There's plenty of time. It's now through December 21st that you can comment on it. And then they work forward a couple months working on this. They come up with a final proposal, which gets vetted by several other committees. The Ethics Committee, Patient Affairs Committee, Public Safety Committee, all these different committees weigh in on it to see how it impacts their area of concern. And then finally it goes to the board that weighs in on it and either passes it or not. If it do pass it, okay, now you say, well, there it is. No, it's not. IT has to program it. And there's so much work being done by IT, they're overwhelmed. So it's not going to go into effect next June when they have that meeting. It may be months thereafter. So this is something that is easily a year in the future, but the opportunity is now to change it. Right, Ron?
Yeah.
And with that, we leave that as your recommendation. And we're going to move on. Ron, thank you very
You're
much.
welcome.
Hey, I got a book for you, Ron. That's one of the great quotes from great leaders. You can use those quotes, and in the back is a DVD
Okay.
of slides that
I
goes
thought
with
you were
that.
going to give me Reg Green's book again.
No, you already got that one.